Sometimes it takes decades to build a bridge between nations and just one reckless act to burn it down. Today, the entire world is watching the cracks in one of the most powerful alliances, America and India. And the shocking part, those cracks didn't start from foreign armies or political revolutions. They began with the actions of a single individual. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll see exactly how one Indian's decision may have just shaken the foundation of two global superpowers. When we talk about the relationship between the United States and India, we're not just talking about two countries shaking hands for photo ops and signing a few trade deals. We're talking about a relationship that has been painstakingly built over decades, brick by brick, through moments of trust, moments of tension, and moments of mutual respect. And yet, here's the hard truth: no matter how strong that bridge looks from the outside, it's far more fragile than people think. One bad moment, one misstep, one wrong statement at the wrong time can send cracks running through the whole foundation. You see, the US-India alliance didn't happen overnight. It wasn't born out of charity, and it wasn't just a product of shared values. It was a slow, careful dance. The United States saw in India a rising powerhouse, a democracy with over 1 billion people, a growing economy, and a strategic location in one of the most contested regions of the world. India saw in the US a superpower that could open doors to technology, defense, capital, and global influence. Each side knew the other could help them climb higher on the ladder of global leadership. But here's the thing about partnerships like this: they're not just built on agreements, they're built on trust. And trust is an emotional currency. Lose it, and you lose everything. It's easy to think alliances between nations are bulletproof because they involve armies, trade agreements, and powerful leaders. But history teaches us otherwise. Look at how quickly political winds can shift. Look at how many unbreakable alliances in the past have shattered when personal pride, political missteps, or sudden public outrage got in the way. When two nations work together, there are thousands of people in government, business, and diplomacy holding the threads together. But those threads are thin, and they can snap faster than you expect. Now, the US and India have had their share of disagreements before, over trade tariffs, over defense purchases from other countries, over human rights issues. But those disagreements were handled behind closed doors, where diplomats could smooth over the edges and keep the public perception intact. Because perception, my friends, is everything. You can have the most rock-solid defense agreement in the world, but if the people in either country start doubting the other's intentions, that agreement becomes just paper. And in today's hyper-connected age, perception can change overnight, all thanks to one headline, one viral video, or one soundbite replayed 1,000 times. That's why this current situation is so dangerous. We're not dealing with a slow brewing policy dispute that can be negotiated quietly. We're dealing with an emotional spark that lit a fire, and it's spreading faster than the diplomats can put it out. The truth is, the stronger the alliance, the higher the expectations. When one side feels insulted, betrayed, or undervalued, it cuts deeper. It's like a close friend suddenly making a cruel joke at your expense in front of the whole room. It's not just the words that hurt, it's the trust that gets shattered. And here's where it gets tricky. When you have a relationship that's built over decades, both sides become invested, not just politically, but economically, militarily, and socially, billions of dollars in trade deals. Joint military exercises, shared intelligence operations, student exchange programs, technology transfers. All of these are delicate threads that rely on the assumption that we've got each other's back. If that assumption is ever seriously shaken, every one of those threads starts to fray. And once the fraying begins, repairing it takes far more effort than building it in the first place. Some people think this is just politics as usual, that two big countries will yell posture and then quietly make up. But that underestimates the emotional side of diplomacy. Leaders have egos, nations have pride, and the people, ordinary citizens, have memories. If public opinion turns sour in one country against the other, leaders feel the pressure to stand firm, even if it costs them economically or strategically. And when that happens, it's no longer just about negotiation. It's about saving face. That's when compromises become harder to reach and small problems turn into lasting rifts. Right now, the US-India partnership is standing on a tightrope. On one side, there's decades of progress, mutual benefit, and shared ambitions. On the other side, there's suspicion, resentment, and the risk of drifting apart. The balance between the two depends on how carefully each side handles these next few moments. Because in diplomacy, like in life, you can spend years building something beautiful and lose it all in a single day. And that's why when one individual's actions suddenly send shockwaves through such a fragile alliance, the consequences can reach far beyond that person's intentions. This isn't just about what was said or done. It's about the chain reaction it sets in motion. Every major conflict in history can usually be traced back to a single moment, a spark that ignited the fire. And in the case of what we're witnessing between the United States and India right now, That spark came from one person, one Indian, one statement, one decision, one action that cut across the grain of everything the two nations had been building for decades. Now, I know some people will say, oh, come on, it's not possible for one person to destroy an entire relationship between two powerful countries. But that's where they're wrong. Because in the age we live in, one moment, especially when it's captured, shared, and magnified, can set off a chain reaction that topples even the strongest alliances. What makes this so explosive is not just what happened, but who it came from. This wasn't some anonymous voice in the crowd. This was a figure with influence, authority, and a platform. Someone whose words and actions carried weight, not just in their own country, but across the world. And when someone like that speaks or acts in a way that insults, challenges, or undermines another nation, it doesn't get brushed off as personal opinion. It gets taken as a reflection of national sentiment. Whether it's fair or not doesn't matter. Perception becomes reality. The incident itself, on the surface, might seem like a moment of passion, a miscalculation, or even a strategic move meant for domestic politics. But the ripple effect went far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. Because here's the thing, international relations are not just about policies and deals, they're about pride and respect. When one side feels attacked, they're not just calculating the economic or political costs, they're weighing the symbolic blow. And in this case, the blow landed hard. Think about it in diplomacy. Tone matters as much as substance. A leader or influential figure could express the exact same disagreement in a way that maintains dignity and mutual respect. But when it comes wrapped in accusation, mockery, or open defiance, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. It forces the other side into a corner. They can't just stay silent because silence looks like weakness. And when a superpower feels publicly challenged, the instinct is to push back hard. That's exactly what happened here. The United States could have handled this quietly through back channels with a few discreet calls and diplomatic reassurances. But the moment this incident hit the media, it stopped being a private matter. It became a public spectacle. Now, both nations were performing on the world stage, and neither could afford to be seen as the one backing down. The most dangerous part is how quickly narratives form in moments like this. Within hours, the headlines were everywhere. Social media was flooded with clips, quotes, and angry commentary. And let me tell you, once that train leaves the station, it's almost impossible to pull it back. People start choosing sides. Influencers, journalists, and politicians start framing the story to fit their agendas. And before you know it, the original event is no longer just something that happened. It's a symbol, a rallying cry for those who want to see the relationship fail. Now, it's important to understand in the world of geopolitics, there's almost never a single villain. This individual may have lit the match, but the fire only spread because the ground was already dry. There were already tensions beneath the surface, trade disputes, policy disagreements, competing interests in global affairs. All it took was one moment to bring all of it boiling to the surface. And here's the chilling truth. When one person with influence makes a move like this, it can undo years of trust that thousands of diplomats, business leaders, and visionaries work to build. That's the real tragedy. It's not just about the insult or the incident itself, it's about how it erodes the foundation of cooperation. Because once suspicion enters the room, it changes the entire atmosphere. Every future negotiation, every conversation, every handshake becomes tinged with the memory of that moment. Some will argue this will blow over, that both nations will eventually move past it. And maybe they will. But they won't forget it. The scar will remain, and scars have a way of changing how you move, how you act, how you trust. One person may not have the power to declare war or end a treaty on their own, but they do have the power to plant seeds of doubt that grow into thorns between two allies. And that's exactly what happened here. One person, one action, one moment, and the air between two nations has never been the same. If there's one thing you have to understand about the modern world, it's this. Media doesn't just report the news anymore. It shapes it, it amplifies it, and in some cases, it creates it. The moment this incident happened, it wasn't just an event between the United States and India. It became a story. And the second something becomes a story, it takes on a life of its own. Facts get blended with opinions, angles get sharpened, and before long, the narrative isn't just about what happened. It's about how it's being told. The problem is that the media, both traditional and social, thrives on tension. Calm, measured diplomacy doesn't sell. Outrage sells. Conflict sells. Headlines that make people click, watch, and share are the ones that carry drama. So when one influential Indian figure made a move that rattled the United States, the coverage wasn't careful or restrained. It was explosive. Every outlet wanted to be the first to break a new detail, dig up an old quote, or find an expert to predict what this means for the future. The more dramatic the prediction, the better. Now, imagine this. Within minutes, clips of the incident are cut, edited, and posted online. On television, panelists are debating it. On Twitter, people are choosing sides and throwing out hashtags. On YouTube, Commentators are uploading breaking analysis videos with bold titles designed to spark outrage. The original event stops being a simple fact. It becomes a performance acted out on millions of screens across the globe. And here's the danger. Once the story is out there, the pressure on both governments skyrockets because it's no longer just about the actual disagreement. It's about public opinion. Leaders know they're being watched. Every move is scrutinized, every statement picked apart. And when public opinion turns against you, it's not just an abstract idea. It becomes a political reality. Politicians in both countries start feeling heat from their own citizens. Why aren't you standing up for us? Why are you letting them disrespect us? That pressure is often what forces leaders to take a harder stance than they might have wanted to in the first place. And the media knows this. They know that if they frame a story as an insult or betrayal, the audience will react emotionally. And when the audience reacts emotionally, the leaders have no choice but to respond in kind. That's how small fires become raging infernos. The media pours fuel on it, not necessarily out of malice, but because that's what gets attention in a crowded information market. Social media takes this to another level entirely. It's no longer just journalists and anchors setting the tone. It's millions of ordinary people adding their voices, memes, jokes, and anger to the conversation. And let's be honest, social media rarely encourages moderation. It encourages the loudest, most extreme takes. People aren't rewarded for saying, let's wait for the facts. They're rewarded for making the boldest statement, for framing the incident in the most sensational way possible. And when you have that echo chamber effect, where anger feeds more anger, it's almost impossible for cooler heads to prevail. This is where the real danger to US-India relations lies. Because the more the media spins the incident as a deep insult or a threat to national pride, the harder it becomes for either side to quietly patch things up. No politician wants to be seen as backing down after days of headlines calling for a strong response. And no leader wants to face their people after being portrayed as weak on the global stage. The media spotlight locks everyone into their positions. It turns what could have been a 2-day misunderstanding into a month-long diplomatic crisis. And here's what most people don't see. The media cycle doesn't just affect the big decisions. It seeps into the smaller ones. Lower-level diplomats start becoming more cautious in their wording. Joint projects get quietly delayed. Invitations to conferences or state visits get postponed indefinitely. The trust that once allowed for easy collaboration gets replaced by hesitation, all because the narrative being told is no longer two partners working through an issue, but two rivals exchanging blows. In the end, the media didn't cause the incident, but it made it far more dangerous. By amplifying every emotion, by framing every development in the most dramatic terms possible, it created a climate where reconciliation feels like surrender. And in that kind of environment, even the smallest gesture can be misinterpreted as weakness. That's how one moment, multiplied through the megaphone of the media, becomes a turning point that neither side can walk away from quietly. What the public sees in moments like this is just the surface, the speeches, the interviews, the televised statements. But what really decides the outcome of an international crisis is what happens behind the scenes. This is where the political chess game begins, where every move is calculated, every word weighed, and every signal sent with a purpose. And let me tell you, when a relationship as important as the one between the United States and India is under strain, the back channels light up like a Christmas tree. The moment that incident broke and started making headlines, you can bet phones began ringing across continents. Ambassadors were called in for urgent consultations. Senior diplomats were pulled out of other meetings and told, we need to get ahead of this. Now, there's a certain rhythm to these crises. First, the rush to gather every scrap of information about what exactly happened, what was meant by it, and how the other side is reacting. Then the quiet, deliberate effort to shape the narrative before it spins out of control. In Washington, aides would have been preparing briefing notes for the president, outlining possible scenarios and response options. In New Delhi, similar reports would have been landing on the prime minister's desk. Both sides would be asking the same questions. Is this a misunderstanding we can smooth over? Or is this a direct challenge that we have to answer firmly? The tricky part is that the answer isn't always clear, especially when public emotions are running high and the media is already painting the picture in bold strokes. This is where the chessboard metaphor really comes alive. In chess, you don't just think about your next move, you think about how your opponent will respond and how you'll counter that response, and so on. In diplomacy, it's the same. If the US issues a strong public statement, will India double down? If India calls for calm, will that be seen as weakness or wisdom? Every move is weighed not just for its immediate impact, but for the chain reaction it might set off. There's also the matter of signals. In this kind of situation, countries often send messages to each other without saying them outright. That could mean delaying a planned meeting, quietly freezing a trade negotiation or allowing certain leaks to the press. Sometimes it's as subtle as a change in tone during a press briefing. These are moves on the chessboard, testing the other side's resolve, probing for an opening, or setting up a counterattack without committing to it publicly. And make no mistake, both countries are aware that the rest of the world is watching. Allies, rivals, and neutral nations are all paying close attention to how this is handled. Because if one side is seen as folding under pressure, it sends a signal to everyone else, push hard enough, and they'll back down. That's not a message any superpower wants to send. So even if cooler heads behind the scenes are saying, let's resolve this quietly, there's always that voice whispering, but what will it look like if we do? Of course, not all the backroom moves are hostile. There are always quiet efforts to de-escalate, trusted intermediaries reaching out, private assurances being given, possible face-saving compromises being floated. Sometimes both sides know they need to cool things down, but they're looking for the right timing, the right wording, the right moment to pivot without appearing to retreat. That's the art of diplomacy, finding a way for both sides to step back from the edge while claiming they've stood their ground. But here's the catch. While these backroom moves are happening, the clock is ticking. Every hour that passes without progress means the public narrative hardens, positions become more entrenched, and it becomes politically harder to make concessions. That's why in these moments, speed matters just as much as strategy. You have to make your moves before the situation calcifies into something far more dangerous. What's happening now between the US and India isn't just a reaction to one person's actions. It's a complex dance of messages, counter messages, calculated silences, and strategic leaks. Every piece on the board is in motion, and one wrong move could set off consequences that will take years to undo. When we talk about strained relations between two major powers like the United States and India, we can't just focus on the politics and the headlines. We have to look at the deeper, more tangible consequences, the things that go beyond pride and speeches. Because when the political temperature rises, it's not just diplomats who feel the heat. It's businesses, it's militaries, it's scientists, it's students, it's workers. And in this particular case, the ripple effects could reach into areas worth billions of dollars in decades of cooperation. Let's start with the economy. The US and India are deeply intertwined through trade. We're talking about technology exports, software services, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and manufacturing. American companies see India as a massive growth market, and Indian companies rely on the US for both investment and access to cutting-edge innovations. But when relations sour, deals start getting delayed. Investors get nervous. Governments begin looking for alternative partners just in case. A project that was full steam ahead yesterday might suddenly be put on hold because no one knows where the political winds are blowing. Then there's the tech sector, which is one of the brightest threads tying these two countries together. Silicon Valley and India's IT hubs have been exchanging talent, ideas, and money for decades. But here's the reality. If political trust erodes, so does the willingness to share sensitive technologies. Restrictions get tighter. Cybersecurity cooperation slows down. Joint ventures start facing more red tape. The same tools that once connected the two economies become points of suspicion. And in a world where technology moves fast, even a temporary slowdown can cause a lasting disadvantage. On the military side, the stakes are even higher. In recent years, the US and India have worked together in the Indo-Pacific region to counterbalance other powers, conduct joint naval exercises, and share intelligence. This kind of cooperation doesn't just happen automatically. It's built on a foundation of strategic trust. If that trust is shaken, suddenly the calculus changes. Military deals can be quietly renegotiated or even canceled. Access to shared intelligence can be reduced. Training programs might get scaled back. And when you pull back even a little in the defense world, you create openings for other powers to step in and fill the gap. Even in areas like education and research, the effects can be felt. Thousands of Indian students choose to study in the United States every year, bringing not just tuition money, but also talent and innovation. American universities benefit enormously from these students, and India benefits when they bring skills and knowledge back home. But if tensions deepen, visa policies can tighten, cultural exchange programs can shrink. Suddenly, that flow of human capital, the lifeblood of shared innovation, slows down. The danger here is that once these kinds of shifts begin, they tend to reinforce each other. Reduced economic cooperation makes military cooperation harder. A slowdown in education exchange limits future technological partnerships. Every strained sector feeds into the next, creating a downward spiral that becomes harder to reverse. And all of this can happen without a single formal announcement. No one has to say, the alliance is over. It simply fades in practice, even if it still exists on paper. And let's not forget the symbolic impact. The US-India partnership has been seen by many as a model for how two large democracies can work together in an era of global uncertainty. If that partnership fractures, it sends a signal far beyond Washington and New Delhi. It tells the rest of the world that even strong, mutually beneficial alliances can be undone by a single flashpoint. That emboldens rivals and discourages other nations from putting too much faith in any single alliance. This is why the current situation is so dangerous. It's not just about an exchange of sharp words or bruised egos. It's about the potential unraveling of years of economic, military, and cultural ties that have been painstakingly built. Once those threads start breaking, putting them back together is not just difficult, it's costly. And in a world where power and influence shift quickly, neither side can afford that kind of loss. One incident may have sparked the tension, but if it spreads into these deeper layers of cooperation, the damage won't just be temporary, it will be generational. Right now, the relationship between the United States and India is standing at a crossroads. On one path lies the possibility of repairing the trust, rebuilding the momentum, and showing the world that even strong allies can weather storms when they choose dialogue over division. On the other path lies a slow but steady breakdown where small acts of distrust pile up, communication thins out, and the two nations drift farther apart until they're no longer working toward the same vision. The choice between these two futures isn't going to be made by accident. It's going to come down to intentional, calculated steps taken by leaders on both sides. The first step toward repair is recognizing the real nature of the problem. It's not just about the one person who caused the immediate spark. It's about the fact that the spark landed in a field already dry with underlying tensions, trade disputes, policy disagreements, competing regional interests. If those deeper issues aren't acknowledged and addressed, then even if this particular fire is put out, another one will eventually start. Repair begins with honesty. Both sides have to be willing to admit what's really been bothering them, even if it's uncomfortable to put it on the table. From there, the conversation has to move into the realm of action, not just words. Public statements of friendship are important, but they won't carry much weight if they aren't backed by concrete gestures. That might mean fast, tracking a stalled trade agreement, announcing a joint initiative that clearly benefits both nations, or resuming high-profile military exercises to signal that the security partnership is still solid. In diplomacy, visible actions are often more powerful than private reassurances because they change the perception that things are falling apart. At the same time, leaders need to be careful about their timing and tone. When emotions are high, even a well-meaning move can be misinterpreted if it comes too soon or is framed the wrong way. The art is in creating space for tempers to cool without letting the silence harden into disengagement. That's where skilled diplomacy earns its name, finding the balance between patience and decisiveness. Repairing trust will also require managing the media narrative. As long as the headlines keep framing this as a crisis, public pressure will continue to make it harder for leaders to compromise. This doesn't mean trying to control the press. It means finding ways to feed the news cycle with positive developments. Invite reporters to cover cooperative projects. Hold joint press conferences where both leaders speak about shared goals. Make sure the images being broadcast to the world aren't just of tense meetings and cold stares, but of collaboration and forward movement. Of course, none of this will work if there isn't a shared willingness to prioritize the relationship over short-term political points. And that's the challenge. In both countries, there will be voices calling for toughness, for taking a stand, for not backing down. Leaders will have to resist the temptation to play to the crowd at the expense of long-term strategy. The question they must ask themselves is simple: what's worth more? Winning a momentary political victory, or preserving a partnership that has the power to shape the balance of the world for decades to come? If the decision is made to repair, the benefits will be enormous. The US and India will send a powerful message to the world that their alliance is resilient, that they can disagree without falling apart, and that mutual respect still forms the foundation of their partnership. This would not only restore confidence between them, but also reassure allies and unsettle rivals who might have been betting on their split. If the decision is made, intentionally or through neglect, to let things slide toward ruin, the losses will be just as significant. Economic cooperation will keep shrinking. Strategic coordination will falter. The trust that took decades to build will be replaced with suspicion that could last for a generation. And once that shift happens, no amount of speeches will bring it back quickly. This is the moment of decision. The road ahead is clear in both directions. What's unclear is whether the leaders on both sides have the courage, the discipline, and the vision to take the harder road, the road of repair, before the easier road of ruin becomes the only one left. When we step back and look at the full picture, it's sobering to realize just how quickly the course of history can be altered. Decades of cooperation, billions of dollars in shared opportunity, years of military coordination, and countless personal connections between two nations can all be shaken by a single moment, especially when that moment is amplified by the media, inflamed by public opinion, and maneuvered through the unforgiving chessboard of global politics. But as much as this is a warning, it's also a choice. The United States and India are not powerless bystanders in this story. They are the authors of the next chapter. They can choose to see this as the point where everything broke, or as the moment when they proved their alliance was stronger than one man's words or one moment's heat. History will not remember the sound bites. It will remember the direction taken after the storm. It will remember whether the bridge between these two democracies was allowed to collapse, or whether both sides rolled up their sleeves and rebuilt it stronger than before. Because in the end, alliances aren't tested when things are easy, they're tested when things are hard. And right now the test is here. The question is whether they will pass it.